What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review podcast. Hanging out with Rob today. We were supposed to do this like a week ago, but I had some hardware issues with my computer and such, and we had to push it back. But man, it's been a while, dude. How you been?
Been good. It's been funny. We've been sitting on these albums for like a month. So it's like
Yeah,
I feel like I have a lot of familiarity just in the last month of having these records that I don't listen to all the time be kind of on regular rotation. It's a nice change of pace. We rarely focus on a region like this and a time
right.
period like this, so niche.
Yeah, it kind of accidentally happened. It was actually an accident based on like punk rock bowling and my enthusiasm for getting to see two bands that are radically different as far as my like experiences with them. As for anybody's wondering, we're talking about the Damned, and we're going to talk about Coxbar Shock Troops. And so, we'll start that conversation here in just a minute. Uh, just a disclaimer to anybody who's wondering: these videos are basically album reviews. So I'm not an expert on anything. I don't claim to be. This is more or less a topical conversation. We are going to talk about the album and the songs, and then if something else comes up in it, so be it. But if we make a mistake, it is A, not intentional. B, we did do some research, but it wasn't into the life and time of these bands. It was more or less the album. So if we make a mistake, it's not on purpose. I did try to do as much research as I could. Time is limited right now. That's starting to fix itself, though. I'm having a lot more time at home, so this shouldn't be an issue anymore. But I do hear what people are saying. I do take it seriously. I wish people would also do the same for me, and they don't seem to want to most of the time. So just chill, man. Like, I'm not trying to piss nobody off. If I didn't want to talk about these bands, I wouldn't. So obviously I care. Uh, that being said, we're going to talk about the Damned first. And the reason we're going to talk about the Damned first is because I have basically never liked the Damned, like ever.
Hmm.
About a year ago, maybe a little longer than that, I started fooling around with like going back and listening to bands that I wasn't familiar with or didn't care about at one point or whatever, for whatever reason, because I always got stuck in my own style of punk music. I didn't care about the older bands, and it wasn't that I actively disliked them. I just didn't have the time or desire to fool with it. I just was like, nope, I know what I like. I like that. No need to, move around outside these parameters. But what I've found out is, A, my tastes have changed a lot over the past like couple of years. And I think it was just because I'm getting a little older. But in doing this channel, it's given me the time and also the desire to go back and like rediscover things, try bands out. And it all really kind of started with the Clash thing. Like, I accidentally stumbled across the fact that I had never heard their second album, which on one hand was kind of embarrassing. On the other hand, I was like, oh, this is awesome because I got to discover something that everybody told me existed that I just had never experienced. So when I was like, oh crap. So I don't know. People can laugh, they can call me whatever they want. I don't care, dude. I'm gonna keep doing my thing. I love this stuff. I love the music, and it's my whole life at this point. It's kind of always has been, but that's the long way to say like I have really come to appreciate the Damned's music, or at least a couple of their albums. The Machine Gun Etiquette, I think that's their third record, I think, and then this one here, Damn, are the two that I really enjoy. Uh, And the reason that I wanted to talk about these records is because I was going to go see the Damned at Punk Rock Bowling, and so I had listened to it a little bit, and I was like, you know what? Let's cover an album that people might be surprised that I'm listening to, surprised that I enjoy. And so, I did a little bit of listening. I listened to the record a few times, but I also listened to and slash watched a couple of little mini documentaries about the band. So there's some things that I do want to bring up. I'm attempting to do this the right way, and I hope that I don't make any mistakes. But if I do, just let me know in the comments. And I'm being respectful. I'd appreciate that in return. Yeah. So as far as the Damned, Rob, how familiar are you with this band, and what do you like about them or dislike?
So it's not a band that I will say that I could tell you like what song was on every album and that kind of stuff. They've never really been that kind of band for me. I remember discovering them in the early 2000s, just based off of their aesthetic. I forget what it was that I had seen them in, and I kind of always liked when I was younger, like that gothic aesthetic. Even though as I grew old, I kind of grew more into punk music, but I always like just that was like kind of the style that was sort of cool back then, and I always liked things that had that imagery. So I remember coming across the Damned in that way, and just knowing them as this sort of like this horror punk band or something like that. And it wasn't until a few years later, because then my familiarity with them happened to be guys like Captain Sensible and those guys like on a lot of documentaries. So for me, they were just an old band that I kind of categorized with a lot of the other older bands of the time, a lot of the older British bands. And it wasn't until I want to say years later, it was maybe like Matt Skiba, or it was either an interview that Skiba did or me in conversation with someone about Alkaline Trio, and them really saying, well, the band that kind of did that sort of dark pop punk thing first, the one that really created it, was the Damned. And so that led me to go and sort of reach back and kind of appreciate them. And I've sort of divided up into the two categories. It's like the punk rock stuff that we're talking about now. And then once they hit the 80s, they're really this big band in terms of like gothic style and that 80s aesthetic, and going beyond even punk rock. And they became more of, I think it became more of a general use band as time has gone on, where a lot of different genres owe to them. And they're even old in terms of punk rock. Like they predate a lot of the old punk rock that we associate as like original punk rock. They're like as original of a punk rock band as you can get, with their own very unique style. That's just it's like their thing. You like the Buzzcocks are the super like boy band from the UK. You have like a working class band like Cockspur. You have the Pistols, which are the rebellious band, and this is sort of like the gothic Dracula band, is how I put this in terms of the UK bands. Yeah.
Actually, that's actually the best thing you could have said. The way you put all that was perfect, because we had incredibly different experiences like getting into this band, which I think is great because it makes for better conversation. I didn't even have the Alkaline Trio Damned connection until probably like 10 years ago, because it just never came up. So the way that I got interested in this band, or the way I was introduced to this band, excuse me, was via being a fan of just punk in general and having some old school dudes tell me like, hey, here's some bands you need to check out. This is how I just, heard for the first time Bad Brains, Minor Threat, The Damned, The Clash, all these bands from like the late 70s. It was through a couple of different people. And I remember like being introduced to them, not really feeling it, kind of not really paying it much mind. And then a few years later, when I'm closer to like, 20 years old, 21, I had seen the cover of this album at a record store, and I was like, why do I know this band? And I was still a kid. I was like 20, man. And I was like, whatever, man. It's in the punk section. I'm looking for something new. And I grabbed it. But the cover of this album has always looked as if it was from a time that the album is not. It looks like a modern, even right now, it looks like a modern album cover. The guys have style. They have style that tracks right now. And so when I bought it, I was thinking it was an album from whenever I was buying it. And so when I played it, I was like, what? And I just didn't get it back then. It is what it is. I liked what I like. I still like what I like. But I just kind of tossed it aside like, I don't like this. You know what the thing is a lot of what I like now is a lot more lo-fi and garagey sounding than what I used to like. I used to love a much more polished sound. As I get older and I get into more and more underground deep cuts, stuff produced by bands themselves on a low budget, all that stuff has a very specific sound, and I really adore that at this point in my life. And it represents something to me that maybe I didn't know I wanted when I was in my 20s. So I just kind of passed them over. But yeah, the Damned, they have now. It's kind of a technicality, but they do have the first UK punk rock single, and I believe the first UK punk rock album. Now, to my understanding, the Sex Pistols had already played shows, already had stuff recorded. It just wasn't released yet. But if you're going by the record books, the Damned are the first to do it in the UK.
And that's generally a factoid about them. That's like one of the things that people who kind of say after they are the actual original UK punk band in a lot of ways. Well, and it's funny because if we sort of stipulate that a lot of and we'll talk about a little bit of that difference with the band we're going to talk about next, but if we kind of have like the big bang of punk happening in New York in the late 70s, it's not just the Sex Pistols that started a band in the UK. It's a lot, there's like a whole scene. And you listen to this stuff too, it is very much in that thing that like without a doubt, all the British bands were trying to be massive pop stars. All the British punk bands
Right.
in that early wave, and this stuff is sort of formatted in that way. And that's what's kind of funny about it is it's got a weird mix of being very UK, but also very like New York proto punk all at once. And I think that has like a uniqueness,
Well,
a
there's a
uniqueness
reason.
to it.
There's a reason for that. If I'm not mistaken, let's see. I wrote this down. I wrote down a few things just to make sure I had some like, again, factoids like in ready. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. So when they put an ad in some personals, I think they were looking for a drummer. I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they're looking for a drummer. In the ad, it said, must be aware of the music scene happening in New York City. And this is in like the late 70s, dude, like when they were first starting to get going. So, yes, they were very aware of New York. They were very much trying to not mimic it, but they wanted to be a part of it, if that makes sense.
Well, and that's why I find this actually to be really interesting over the last week or a few weeks as we've been breaking it down. Is a lot of the earlier punk. I hate to say it, but it is so Ramones derivative because that's the only thing there really is to go off of. So there's so much of the early punk that we talk about where like half of it is very Ramone centric and the other half is original. The Damned is very, very little of it sounds like the Ramones. It sounds
Right.
like a band that had much of the same influences as the Ramones. And so like, and I know there's a Stooges song on here and stuff like that, but that's what a lot of this stuff sounds like is the proto punk. It sounds like the Stooges, a little bit like the underground.
Yeah.
It sounds like that mid 70s New York stuff more so than people that would have listened to a punk band and tried to kind of replicate that. It sounds a lot more original to me than some of the other bands.
I often just kind of don't spend the time arguing with people about where did punk come from because in my opinion it came from New York. Hard stop, like just New York. That's the answer, right? But if you really want to be like honest about it, it's the Ramones, and then it just immediately boom over to the UK because all the bands that we love, they cite their influences. I would say like 60, 70, 80% of their influences are all UK bands because in America, everything was a derivative of the Ramones. It was all just fast, sped up pop rock.
Well, and
Over there,
punk was bigger in the we should mention punk was bigger and more commercially viable in the UK. So
because it took a different like a different path. Like punk here, and I don't mean this to sound like in any way insulting, but like over here it was like organic and it kind of just became a thing because some bands started. Punk was almost manufactured in the UK. I would say that it kind of was. Like,
well, you can argue guys like Malcolm McLaren 100% manufactured punk rock in the UK.
Right. I mean, that's kind of my point. I don't mean that in like a disrespectful way. It just means that somebody had an idea and they thought, hey, I can spread a message because that's what these guys want to do. And I want to make some money. If we put us together, we can do these things. I don't see that that's necessarily bad. Some people might, but I think that happening, it gave a lot more attention to the punk. Plus, when the punk rock in America was just a bunch of snotty teenagers, they were thinking it was a phase. When it was like politically charged in the UK, they were like, okay, this could be a problem. And so it just got more headlines. It was just a much more bombastic thing in the UK.
Well, and it's still the case, I think, which if you look back at the stuff, the American punk rock is more like internal. It's more that those sort of internal struggles and stuff like that. And the UK punk rock was more social and the social struggles and all that. And it's sort of the nature of the populaces too. Like you look at like who's a more like a protest nature and more natural to them. It's more of a UK thing. Plus, there is other avenues to do that. And it's just, I mean, it part of it's a difference of cultures and that side. That's a good point though, because like the American punk really is a club scene. If you want to put it was just the result of a club scene, and this is a lot more conscious, which is also why I think it's a lot more theatrical in the UK as well, because it's a lot more intentional in what they're trying to create. Yeah, and so and like you said, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And also, if it wasn't for all these little things that bursted out of the UK, we wouldn't have so much diversity of punk later on. Because a lot of that helped build that.
I didn't even used to understand this. I probably didn't know this till I was a full-ass 30-year-old adult. The UK may not have been technically first, but outside of the Ramones, they were doing it the best early on. They had all the bands that mattered. until like the early 80s. For like 3-4 years, it was all UK stuff. American punk didn't really pick up and start moving until we got like hardcore stuff, like in the early 80s with Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Black Flag, stuff like that. So, like, did America light that match? Yes, but that wick and that piece of dynamite was over in UK, and if we started talking history of punk, we would probably spend the first 10 episodes talking about all UK stuff. And it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. I think some people get offended by facts. Some people want their team to be, dude, I don't have a team, man. My team is good music. So like, I think it's awesome. And I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity to go back and retry this stuff. And it's not like I get to make a first impression again, but I get to go back years after I ever cared to listen to any of this stuff and just try it again. And the fact that I want to do it and I'm not being forced to do it is it's a blessing, man, because it's given me opportunities to, like, think about if I was doing this for like a job or well, it is my job, but like if it was like a demand, I had to do this. This was my criteria. I had to meet. Boom, 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 boom. Man, I might still hate this stuff, but I chose to listen to it, and it was a good time, man. And honestly, I do want to spend a little time talking about their live set. So I've never seen the band play until Punk Rock Bowling, and I heard a lot of people say, like a lot of people tell me, like, man, their live set just, for a first time viewer, man, it was not what I wish they would have played. I had a blast, dude. I had a lot of fun. They did play a bunch of songs that I wasn't familiar with, though. I'll give people that I understand what they're saying. They're like, man, they should have just played all the real fast, catchy.
I was going to ask, is it because of all the keys they use and stuff like that, and that sort of
they just played
kind
a bunch
stuff?
they played a bunch of deep cuts, man. And look, I'm not an expert on the band, so I couldn't even tell you what albums they were from. But I remember that half the songs I didn't know what they were, but then the other half I did, and so I had a lot of fun. And plus, dude, it was like perfect time of day. The sun was going down. They were on the big stage. I had a really, really, really like transformative experience out in Vegas, man. It might be something that in a couple of years I say it changed my life, man. I met some people that I never thought I'd ever meet. I got to just be around some people that I was friends with on the internet that I'm now personally real friends with. Got phone numbers, talk on the phone, like talk through text. That's important to me because everything that I'm doing is for community. Everything on this channel is for community. Why the hell would I start a zine if I wasn't trying to have a community? Like, I wouldn't do any of this stuff if it wasn't for a community. Because when I was young, I didn't have a community, man. Me and Chris Klink and I talk all the time about how we had completely different experiences, like entering into punk rock. When I got into it, it was dangerous. People were not friendly. It was a place where the outcasts went because we ain't had nowhere else to go. It just so happened there was also a lot of good music going on. But like, dude, I used to get beat up in my own city, dude. Like it was wild because we had North Side punks and we had South Side punks. And it sounds like a S.E. Hinton novel, but it's very true. It was like, and then at 35, 40, 45 years old, none of us give a shit about that anymore. And we see each other out and we're like, oh man, can you believe we used to do that? Oh, we used to fight each other, me and this guy right here. And it's interesting, man. But yeah, I don't remember what I was talking about, honestly. We were talking about I had a point I was trying to make, but
we started talking about their set at Punk Rock Bowling.
The community thing, dudes, because I didn't get to have the community thing when I was younger. Is my point. Sorry. Yeah. I was like, what was I meaning by saying that? I was like, why did I even talk about the old days? Because back then I didn't have that. A lot of people did. Punk was different everywhere. And so it was not huge in Houston. Houston wasn't a big giant punk scene. It was like you was real gritty down here. And so as a person at this point in my life, I'm trying to really just create a place for people to feel comfortable. And these shows are really changing my life. These people I'm meeting at these festivals, these opportunities I've been given, man, I'm trying to make the most of it because I feel like I'm blessed to have it. I don't know what the word is. Like there's like I feel like I'm like, oh shit, opportunity. Better capitalize on this because if I don't, well, why squander this? Somebody else would be really appreciative, So that all being said, sorry, I tend to rant. Their set was excellent, and I had a blast. I think I would go as far as to say like I'm a full like fledged fan of the band at this point. I just ordered a copy of Machine Gun Etiquette so that I can have it at least at my store. I try to carry a couple of their albums all the time, just in general, but like I think I want to have it, listen to it first. I may end up keeping it.
you try to keep like the staples on hand, kind of punk
At least on these, look, I don't want to fake it either, man, and be like, oh, I got all their shit. No, dude. Like on bands like this where I'm starting to get into them again, I own a copy of Give 'Em Enough Rope. I own a copy of Cell Tile Clash. Obviously I own the Sex Pistols album. I also own just a bunch of Cock Sparrer stuff. That's probably the band from that era that I like the most, honestly. But yeah, dude, The Damned is an interesting band. I will say that when you listen to an album like this, it becomes obvious very quick that they're not politically charged, and that is something that makes them unique even in UK music. So like back when this was all going down, all these other punk bands were it was mostly political music. Man, you had the Clash, the Sex Pistols. I mean, like, good grief, dude. It was all, anti-government or at the very least, it was politically motivated. And you had this band that was like, well, we're going to talk about what's happening to us. We're going to talk about the people that we are friends with and the relationships that we have, the issues that we're going through. It was very much more of a pop punk record than it was a like punk rock record. You mentioned that earlier, but I mean, that needs to be hammered home, dude. It's very obvious when you go listen to it. It's like, not really talking about kind of the things you associate with punk rock, which is a great thing because I've always told people that punk rock and politics, they're not always like attached at the hip. There are many, many, many punk bands that don't have anything to do with political topics. But I mean, I do think there is also a massive amount of politics within punk.
There's a large association with it, but it's not an essential part of the.
Thank you. You said that way better than I did. What he said.
Well, and I think it's funny because like the Damned, whether they knew it or not, or whether those who have taken influence from them have fully appreciated them, they sort of set some of those songwriting parameters for bands that would have these kind of aesthetics. Think about a band like the Alkaline Trio. They have a lot of their songs are very much of the pop punk nature, but written from this like horror movie kind of perspective, or this exaggerated perspective, which is very 100%. Similar to what the Damned to what the Damned try to pull off. And I think even taking the Alkaline Trio thing further, I think they took influence from them even as the Damned evolved into their other forms.
For sure. Dude, I've actually used that as an argument before I was even listening to the Damned. Alkaline Trio is not punk. I'm like, is the Damned a punk band? Yeah. I'm like, then how do you say Alkaline Trio is not? They literally, different era, same exact thing.
I think it's a better analogy than a band like the Misfits, because the Misfits are almost like, I don't think the Damned are like, I don't think we would call them horror punk. Maybe you would, because they just more have those dark kind of themes to them, the way you wouldn't really call, even though you kind of would, like Alkaline Trio, horror punk necessarily, where I think someone like the Misfits or like the version of AFI we had for that little while, their whole aesthetic is like a Halloween kind of horror movie sort of aesthetic, which is, it's horror a little nuanced, but it's a little bit different. Yeah, it's weird that because it's hard for stuff to, I think if you're full on like a horror punk kind of band, it's hard for you to do anything else but that. And I think a band like the Damned can pretty much do whatever, even if they have this sort of lane that there's.
Well, you have two factions of horror punk. You have the horror punk bands that are a horror punk band. Then you have the horror punk bands that like they're horror punk, but they also are just a punk band.
Yeah.
There are two kinds of horror punk, and I like all of it. I'm actually working with a band right now called the Misfits, and they do like an amalgamation of the Smiths and the Misfits. It's it's way better than I was thinking it was going to be. Now, I didn't have any reason to think it wasn't going to be good, but like when I heard it and then I watched some of their videos, I was like, wow, this band is awesome. So shout out to those guys. But the Damned, they really did have an early, they had a hand in helping goth become a thing early on. Emo, I think emo, this might be like the first emo band, really, if you think about it. Not I mean, I'm saying that like tongue in cheek, but there's also some truth to it.
But it's like I said earlier, if you talk about the aesthetic that emo came to represent, like in the 2000s and stuff like that, it very much is in the vein of like what the Damned were doing.
Very MCR, or MCR is very the Damned.
Yeah, that's another band that you could say, takes sort of direct influence that you know
100%
had the appearance too of like how they would present themselves, very similar.
So okay, a couple of things that I didn't know about the band. I never knew where their name came from. It came from a Luchino Visconti's film from 1969. It's a Nazi war film called The Damned. That's where they got their name from, if anybody didn't know that. I didn't know that until recently, unless that's just absolutely wrong, which will be pretty embarrassing, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. And the one thing that I always thought or that I got wrong, was that New Rose is not about a girl.
What's it about?
It's about the burgeoning punk scene.
Oh,
Go listen. Once I realized that, or I was, told that through a documentary, I listened to it and I heard it through a whole different, like it was like it changed everything. I was like, oh wow, this song means something completely different than what I thought.
didn't realize that. That's their first song, right? Like that was the song. I think.
New Rose is their first single. Yeah.
I think it had a life of its own before like this album. Even I know it's on this album, but it had like a life of its own
I'm
before.
pretty sure. Yes, I don't know that to be 100% true, but I'm. If I was to ask that on like a game show, I would say yes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where they got the hype about them kind of really picked up with it. It's the single that did well, and then they had the full length shortly thereafter, like a year later, I think.
Something else about the Damned that is unique to them, especially back in the 70s. They were incredibly good at their instruments. Excuse me. They were good musicians. They were good at their instruments. A lot of these bands just were not. I mean, the Clash, I would say, were pretty good at their instruments, right? And there was some talent within the Sex Pistols, but a lot of these guys were just playing sloppy, and they didn't care about guitar leads. They weren't concerned about guitar tone necessarily. It was more aesthetic than it was musicianship, and just within their peer group, I think the Damned were one of the better bands as far as playing their instruments is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like you said, it wasn't as valued in that time period.
Right.
In fact, if anything, it was kind of the sort of weird appeal of punk is that it was sort of accessible to almost everyone. It's not really till later on that like some of the really great musicians started like felt like choosing punk or coming into punk, and now you have such great variety. It's also why this older stuff is like seemingly really easy to play when you tried to play it, because it's written relatively simple.
Well, people weren't doing the same things back then with the guitar that they do these days. Like they just don't. They didn't play them the same. They were much more simple. There's just now chords depends. I can't play chords very well just because I can't. But if you're able to play guitar, older punk stuff is relatively easy to play as far as I understand it.
It's easy to like memorize and to understand. Now to actually make it sound like it, that is very, very difficult. So like that Ramones style,
Actually,
those bar chords, some of that. It's hard to replicate.
Oh yeah, well, because they were playing in a way that wasn't the right way, quote unquote. So like, it is hard to play it. It's just like anything else. If you're doing something, and 95% of people do it one way, and then one guy's like, "Oh, I do it this way." Well, that way is going to be hard to replicate for the rest of the group. But I actually want to go back and ask people, who were some of the musicians? Because I know for a fact that the Damned were thought of as better musicians than a lot of their peers. But who else out there was like thought of as a really good musician, within this time period? Let's say like up till like the early 80s. Is there a group of punk musicians that you really look up to that you think are great, or that were just known as being fantastic at what they did?
I think, and there's probably a few on there. I think X has a lot of really good members. I think like the guitarist specifically in X is like this like genius virtuoso guitarist that could have played any genre. I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's one band though that sort of has. I feel like nowadays you have more of these bands that you could.
Yeah, I'm thinking of.
You just feel like those guys can really play. Like, and
I'm more or less asking about specific musicians, because when I said that a minute ago, I was thinking like the Damned all were kind of good at their instruments, but there's other people in bands that were really good at what they did. And so like it's more or less like a right and wrong statement at the same time. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful to anybody from any other bands, of course, but
you're gonna get hate mail from a bunch of like 80-year-old men saying, "How dare you say we couldn't play?"
Yeah, 1 second. My apologies. I think my wife is calling me. Let me make sure that it's not something I need to do. Yeah, man. The Damned is a band that I think, I don't know if regret is the right word, but I do wish I had gone back to them earlier. I have no issue with being like, oh, I'm 19. I heard this, don't like it, moving on. I don't care. That doesn't bother me at all, because I think everybody's entitled to spend their time listening to what they want to listen to. But I do wish that I had the thought of, hey, I should go retry this again. It's been a few years, because I don't really do that often, and I'm starting to now. But I enjoyed them a lot live, and they're the two albums that I am listening to. I really enjoy. Yeah, dude, there's a thing that happened that I don't know why I wrote this down, but I know what I'm talking about here, but I don't know why it would pertain to this video much, but it is interesting. They were doing, I think it was a tour with the Sex Pistols. It might have just been a show, but the Sex Pistols ended up being told they weren't welcomed at a venue. I think it was just one venue. And they said, we don't want the Sex Pistols anymore for whatever reason. It was likely politically motivated. And they said, but we do want the Damned still. And the Damned played the show without the Sex Pistols. And I guess for quite some time, they were labeled like punk rock traitors. I didn't
Mm.
know that. That's an interesting fact about the band that I didn't know. I think that's cool, man. If anybody has more to that story, man, please let me know. I think it's very interesting. I would love to know kind of more. I guess I could just do my own research on it, but I do like it when people talk in the comments about this stuff. I love reading them. That's actually why it irritates me sometimes, because I do read all the comments like a giant idiot. But
I did see there was a story. I think that they were supposed to be a support band on like what the initial UK tour that the Pistols were on, but I think a lot of those shows got canceled. And then I think the Damned were kicked off of that tour, and I'm not sure for what reason.
dude, there was a bunch of drama going on back then.
Well,
Like,
and I think too with these UK bands, I think there was probably a lot of headhunting going on with like trying to find the next stars out of all of these guys, all these young
right.
guys. And again, you have a lot of these puppet masters in the background who are all trying to, make a quick buck off of all these guys.
Dude, anytime some young punk kid is like, that band's a sellout band because they signed to whatever label. I'm like, what are your favorite like old school punk bands? Give me three of them. Is any of them not on a big label? Like, and it's not because I have any issue with it. I have an issue with them having an issue with it. Who cares? Who gives a shit what label bands are on? If they're getting what they need to get out of it, that's where the question becomes a question. Are they getting what they need to get out of it? Especially back then, it was a different thing altogether.
Mhm.
But like nowadays, is a band getting what they need out of their label contract? Like, then if they are, then who cares? If they're not, then they should renegotiate that. But you should always read all the contracts. My point being, though, is that like you want people to hear your music. That's what every punk band that I've ever spoken to, ever, and I'm talking, this has got to be hundreds. What do you want most with your? I want as many people to hear my music as possible. It's never once been, I want to make as much money as I can. It's always been, I want as many people as can possibly hear my music to hear it. And that only happens with help from other sources. It could be a
Mhm.
label, it could be a platform of some kind, but it typically isn't just on your own. And so, yeah, they were doing a lot of that stuff. With labels were interesting back in the 70s, man. Being in a punk band wasn't like what it. I mean, punk has changed. It's morphed a little bit. It's not the same. Back then, it was like a viable career opportunity if you could play your instruments right. You were like, oh, I want to be a punk rock star. That's fucking weird sounding to me, but it is what they were trying to do.
But I think it links back to something we talked about much earlier in the show, in that like how there's that big wave in the UK in the 70s, and then like America takes back over in the 80s. And I think once the fad of punk rock had completely dissipated, you have in America where the local scenes started picking up, that once they started to get it, we're never going to be big, we don't need the machine in order to be big. That's where you got that building off in the next decade. Really wasn't the case. Like to the extent that these guys were like they weren't DIY, sometimes they were social miscreants, so they lived
Right.
like the way you would think of like DIY, but it really wasn't I don't think they weren't really like the way we kind of like celebrate a band that can do everything on their own and to be self-sufficient and all that. I don't think they were quite looking at that just yet
Well, I
as a
mean,
model.
as much as we all love and respect bands like The Clash, The Damned, Sex Pistols, and even the Ramones, they weren't Minor Threat. They weren't going out there and starting a label, starting a distro,
Mhm.
touring in a van. Like, that wasn't a thing yet. And I think that punk rock started in America. It was a bunch of ingredients added to this pot. In the UK, it was the temperature was turned up and it boiled over, and then we got it back in America once it like was cooked down to here's a recipe. You start your band, you start your label, you press your records, you tour, and then it's all on you. Do you have the work ethic and then the ability to write good songs? You should be fine then. You don't need a big label. So I do think that it took a little these are the training wheel years,
Hmm.
76 through like 82, maybe 81, 80. So a good 4 to 5 years, there was like training wheels, man. People were learning how to do it. They were learning, oh, I think this is a lifestyle, than not just a genre of music for me. I don't think I want to be in punk for 3 years and then out when I'm in college and trying to graduate. No, no, no. I like this because there's a message behind it. I guess that's, yeah, man, it really did morph. I never really thought about it from this angle before, but it did morph in the first generation of punk music. There was a lot of changes.
Hmm. So this stuff's kind of nice though when you see it, that like the stuff all before that, because it is sort of the original concepts, and without the influence of the stuff coming before it. It's really interesting time capsule. Like, I don't think this record sounds that dated necessarily. I think it sounds like a certain type of sound, but it definitely is a time capsule into a certain, like a certain window, into a certain corner.
Yes, that's pretty accurate. It's like a certain, it's like a window in a certain time, and it doesn't sound dated. It's weird too, because if you'd have asked me 20 years ago, does this sound like an old album, I would have said yes. It's odd because you fast forward till I'm in my mid 40s and you go, "Does this sound like an old album?" And I go, "Well, no, it doesn't." And I think it's because I listen to music a whole different way than I used to. I'm not really listening to it for like sleek production necessarily. I actually like a different production style than I used to like in my 20s. I like a different guitar tone. I don't need it to be screaming as much as I liked it when I was young. When I was young, I think that's what really captured my attention. It wasn't even the message, it was the feeling I was getting from the music, because I felt alone, I was angry, and I was hurting all the time. So when these dudes are yelling into a microphone, I loved it, man. So like the faster, the more pissed, the more yelling, I liked it. That's, I wasn't getting that out of 70s punk. It just wasn't. We already had bands like the Casualties. We can't go backwards from that. It doesn't get like much faster until you hit the like D beat and crust punk bands, which I ultimately ended up liking too. So yeah, man, interesting stuff, man. So on their record that we were using as our topic of conversation,
Yeah.
what are some of the songs you really enjoyed?
Obviously the lead off song is probably the most famous damn song there is, neat 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 neat. And that's the thing with a lot of these songs. I could swear that these have all been in television commercials over the years. Every one of these songs sounds like they're
A
they're
lot
that
of
type
them.
of, and some of them have, and some of them are just that made that way. I like Born to Kill, big fan of that one. And then I really like what they have towards the back part of the album. I like See Her Tonight, One of Two, and So Messed Up, all in an order, all in
I
that
put those
exact
down
order.
too.
And I think it hits a little more of like the album is a little more over the place in those first couple of songs, and then it feels like there's a certain like focus in how the songwriting goes and thematically and stuff with all of those before they go back into the Stooges cover. But I really think they close that back end really really nice on this thing.
Right. So I have basically the same stuff that you had, but I just added a few. I have "I Fall" as a song I really enjoyed. "Stab Your Back" I thought was good, short song, but I liked it. "New Rose" is a song that the more I learn about the band, the more I appreciate the song. Just, I liked it already, okay, but like the more I learn about this band, the more I'm like, man, that song is really important. And then also when you look at it through the lens of the fact that it's not talking about a girl, it's talking about a scene that is so important to us. Uh, it becomes a little bit more important even then. So yeah, I think the album overall is really great. I'm glad that I don't know what you call it, coming around. I have no qualms with the fact that I'm a surface level fan of this band. I don't. That's fine. I'm cool with that. I'm glad that I'm here. So yeah, anybody that's watching this, man, let me know what your favorite songs are. What are the deep cuts that you really like and why? I want to know why. Because, oh man, this song's really good. Okay, so you just like it. All right, good. I won't even listen to the song. But if you go, oh, I like the song because the lyrics mean this to me, I will go back and listen to it because I'm interested in that. So if you have something to say about it, please say so. Yeah, The Damned, damn, damn, damned. Very good album. On a scale of 1 to 10, what are you thinking, Rob? You're muted, buddy.
I was gonna say probably in the 7 range.
Okay.
It doesn't hit quite a top peak because I don't think there's quite that density of just like blowaway songs. They're just like pretty good. But I wonder if I liked this style more, would I think it's like a 9 or a 10?
So I don't know that I could ever give this album a 10. I think subjectively I go with like an 8. I really do like it quite a bit. The more I listen to it, the more I'm like, man, I can't believe I was missing out on this for all these years. But And maybe it's because I'm having a little recency bias,
Mhm.
but I do think objectively you'd have to give this like a 9, man. It's the guitar playing is phenomenal. The lyrical content is much more my speed because it's I politics stress me out. So like while they're very important and I do appreciate a good political punk band, this is timeless music that is not dated because they're not talking about a specific date and time within,
Mhm.
you know, popular culture. They're talking about things that were happening to them in their life. That stuff can be relevant indefinitely, and for that reason, I think that this album is probably about a 9. I think objectively, subjectively, that's a little lower for me because I like what I like, but I do really like this album now, and I think it takes a little bit of I don't know what you'd call it. It's sometimes it's hard to admit that an album may either be better or worse than you personally think that it is.
Mm.
But I think this is one of those times where it's probably a little bit better an album than I'm going to even give it credit for. But the guitar playing on it is pretty wonderful. I really like the guitar tone on this album. After the last probably 3 listens, I really was starting to. Here's the thing that I really used to hate doing, but I'm finding out that I need to just do it. Is that I have to listen to albums in their entirety 2, 3, 4, 5 times. That sucks when you don't like something the first time, though.
Mm.
It's really hard for me to be like, "Oh man, I didn't really care for that. Let me listen to it again." I'll give you a great example. The new Turnstile album. It blows ass. I hate it. I listened to it twice. I don't think I can get through it a third time, man. But I
Tough
did
listen.
do what?
It's a I for what you're saying
I did
specifically
try.
of that album. It's a tough. Even I haven't made a determination on it either yet. To be honest with you, because it's a tough listen. Like I'm giggling because I know I like yes. Whenever you have ambient noise for 5 minutes, it's kind of hard to get through the album.
Dude, it just sounds like fucking bare feet and granola. Like I just makes me so sad, bro. I'm just like, what are we doing here, man? But I was just using that as an example because that's an album that I recently listened to that I didn't care for. I gave it a second listen and I was like, all right, I can't do it. I'm not gonna go back on the band any more than I just did. But like, I do wish I could whatever goes in your head that makes you go back and listen to things multiple times. I wish I had thought of doing it much earlier on in my, you know,
Mm.
life of these listening to these albums.
I find that very hard though in our modern day. Like when I hear something new that I like, that I'll because there's just so much stuff that comes out and it's so quick. I find it so hard to grab onto stuff. That's the thing. So I think sometimes when we go back, like what I like about like our show is that like whether I like it or not, I'm kind of forced to listen to it in that way to sort of keep reassessing
Well,
and reappraising.
that's why I throw a curveball sometimes. As people, you and Nitty have both been like, "Oh, surprised you're picking this," and it's almost always because I'm like, "Yeah, I think I just need to. I don't ain't about want, it's about need. I think I need to listen to this album more." So, this album is going to go in rotation for me. What's funny is you mentioned something a minute ago about there's so much music coming out. I think that's a good sign of an album that is going to be great. If it's coming out now and you're so captivated by it that you've listened to it multiple times within a
Mm.
week. In the past year, there's only been a handful of releases outside of my own because the stuff I release, I really love it. So I listen to it all the time. So taking that out of the equation, that Puffer album last year, I
I'm glad you
still
said that one. I like that.
I said Puffer, I meant uh Slugger.
Oh,
Well, the Puffer album I'm fixed to talk
that was
about.
pretty good.
Oh, okay. So the Slugger album last year was one like that, and then last Friday we had Puffer and Beton Arme both drop albums that I think fall into that category where I'm already heard them both 5, 6, 7 times a piece. Like I listened to them all day at work the other day. Like so, those albums are really great, and I think it's nice to have. It doesn't happen all the time, and a lot of bands put out EPs, and it's like yeah, there's 4 good songs and 2 okay ones, which is still fine, but 4 great songs isn't an album's worth. So like
Mm.
that's easy to go, yeah, well, it's a good EP, but it's like, did you give me 11 great songs? That's hard to do.
That plays a role in it. I never really thought about that, but there's so much music, but the limited actually amount of release in that does, with so many of it being a single or 4 songs nowadays, that makes a difference. I also think you're like the only person in America that's putting out punk rock because every time I find a new punk, it's from Canada, it's from the UK, it's from Australia. I don't know if it's not a thing in America anymore, but like every time I'm
Well,
listening to new punk, without a doubt, I look and it's somewhere not America that these bands are coming from.
I'll say it like this: it's a combination of things. One, there's just a resurgence and a like a swell of punk music coming from other parts of the world that's just so good it's getting to us.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a lot of punk coming out of America that's great. I mean, I deal with what 6, 7 bands right now, and I would say they're all quality. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
another 20 bands that I don't have nothing to do with that I could just rattle off that are just. I mean, shit, dude. If you include hardcore to that, Haywire, man, they're probably the best live band I've seen in 20 years, dude. They're fucking fantastic live. Uh, and then I was wearing a band earlier called No Guard. That band's really good too. So the thing is that there's plenty of good stuff coming out of America right now, but there's just a lot of stuff from other countries that is so good that it's getting all
Mm-hmm.
the way over here, and we're responding to it. So like all the
Yeah.
shit out of France, all the stuff out of Mexico, Canada, like there's just so much good. Spain's got a bunch of good shit coming right
I got
now.
caught in a Spanish ska algorithm the other day in my
Oh
Spotify, and
shit!
it's awesome. It's great. This old and like talk about a style of music that really fits well with ska music. I mean,
Oh yeah,
there's already accordions and horns in the music, so it
right.
really works. Yeah. No, I've really been trying to make an effort this year to listen to newer, not just listen to the same 30 albums for the rest of my life. And
Good for
I
you.
keep. And I just keep like Puffer's one that it stood out to me recently, but it's so often that either I like female fronted bands or just female bands in general. And I think maybe we had less of that in the past. So that's something that's newer and a little more unexplored. Maybe there's more to say that hasn't already been said. And then it's
Right.
a bunch of bands from not just the UK. Like you said, Puffer, that's Canada. So it's essentially North America, but it seems like just from all over the globe is what at least also is being pushed on American audiences. That's part of it too. Like what's picking up hype. And I think, yeah, I don't really know if there's a reason for that other than, and also in America, I might just be looking at the stuff from the American bands that I like, and there's more of an opening. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's me personally.
It's a number of different metrics that go into that kind of thing happening to you.
Yeah, and I just feel like there's a lot of the UK stuff feels. I don't know. It feels like it's pulling me a little bit more right now or something.
Well, the music coming out of France, the UK, like UK, England area,
mm-hmm.
and Spain, bro. That's there's a lot of great shit coming out of Australia too. Let me not forget Australia. People are probably already in the comments going, "Ammo and the sniffers." Blah, fucking yeah, I get it, dude. They're sure. But like, yeah, man, it's interesting. We're living in a weird time. I think technology helps that a lot too, and all these social media apps are helping get music over. I think MySpace really changed how we ingest music, and I think for the better. People can hate Spotify all they want, but it does help bands. You got to put your work in too. But people are like, oh, they already made the music. That's not the work. That's the fun part. The work goes in after that. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned the like females in punk, because I'm actually in the process of working on what was supposed to be one video called "Women in Punk." It has turned out to be "Women Are Punk" parts 1, 2, and 3. God damn it, Rob. It's gonna be like 2 hours worth of shit, dude. I'm like in the middle. I'm reading like 3 books right now, bro. What in the fuck? I'm reading to do this shit.
I
know, right? These are gonna be big ones, man. I got hopefully I'm gonna have some people talking to me to help me that were from women that were from the punk rock days of old that are gonna help me. I got some people I reached out to. I would love to talk to Kathleen Hanna. I'm in the middle of reading her book, and everything that I'm reading, I'm thinking like, dude, if she will just let me say like 2 sentences to her, it will make enough sense to where she'll agree to do the show, because she's going through, or excuse me, I'm going through all the things that she went through as far as like trying to get people to talk to her and interview with her. She dealt with all this stuff. So I'm like, oh, she's going to be empathetic to what I'm having to deal with doing this. I fucking hate asking people to come on the show, but it's part of it, man. It just is what it is. I like talking to people, but asking them to come do it, oh, it fucking sucks, man. It took me like 3 months to reach out to Jake Casualty, dude. Like, I'm just like, this fucking guy's going to tell me to kiss his ass. And I'm like, oh man. But he's probably a super nice guy. And also it sucks to get ignored, and that happens a lot. So, but yeah, Women in Punk, dude, Women Are Punk, excuse me, parts 1, 2, and 3 coming hopefully in the next couple of months.